Talk radio is a major form of communication in Chicago. As a host, he lives a full life, socially and professionally. Unless he tells you, you won't know the challenging weight that he faces.
I didn't have time to think about how sick I was because I had a job to do. So I would go from dialysis straight to work, and I would be so consumed with my job that I never really had a chance to really think about what just happened.
That's WVON radio host and dialysis patient Atiba Buchanan. I'm Monica Fox, Senior Director of Outreach and Government Relations for the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois, and your host for this edition of The Journey Continues. Atiba joins us for this episode of The Journey Continues to share how he balances his social, professional, and personal life, all while living with a chronic illness. Hi, Atiba. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, good afternoon, Miss Monica. It is my pleasure to be here.
Great. So tell me, how'd you become a radio host?
Well, I went to school for it. We can start there. Back in 2012, I attended what was then known as Illinois Center for Broadcasting, now known as Illinois Media School. I was working in collections at the time, and I'd gotten back into collections. Actually, it was my second go round. And about 5 years into it, I realized this was not something I wanted to be doing for the next 20. And so when I asked myself a very pivotal question at then age 38, if I could start my life over, my professional life, what would it be? What would I do? And the short answer was I always wanted to be a television anchor. So I did some research. I found Illinois Center for Broadcasting. It's a wonderful school that teaches you both everything behind and in front of the camera for TV and radio. And it's a 1-year program. Long story short, I had no idea that I would fall in love with radio the way that I did, because I went in fully thinking I'm going to be on Channel 7. And it turns out radio just called me. It literally was loving my life. So between different internships that I had done and just building different relationships, I was able to start a podcast back in 2015, developed some material for about 3 or 4 years, took that information, that material to WVON back in 2019. And that's how I got my foot in the door there. They gave me a radio slot. Very, for some undesirable. It was 9 until midnight on Friday nights.
Oh, wow.
Right. So who is
Gotta
talking?
start somewhere.
Gotta start somewhere, right? So I have this show from 9 until midnight on Friday nights talking about politics. And who's listening to that? But it turns out we developed a very strong following. So subsequently, we were able to develop a very loyal following, so much so that when a daytime opportunity opened in the afternoons from 3 until 6, I was tapped for that position, and I've been in that position since October of 21. It has been a journey. That was very much so the truncated version of everything that had happened. There was a lot of knee scraping that I kind of omitted.
Yeah, but that's amazing.
Yeah, that's how I got into radio, and I don't regret a minute of it.
That's amazing and courageous. Not many people, are willing to start over again at the age of 38. So I think that's just awesome.
It was not easy at all. That's the thing too. I was working full time, and I was in school 3 nights a week from 6:30 until 10:30.
Wow.
So yeah, all the while being on dialysis the entire time.
Yes, we're going to get to that totally. That's the part of the story that really makes it amazing. So, I follow you on social media and you have lots of great social experiences. So, what's one of your most memorable experiences that you've had in your current role?
Oh my goodness. We're coming off of 4 straight days of broadcasting live from the DNC, the history-making Democratic National Convention that was here in Chicago.
Yes, that was amazing.
It was. We aired every day from 2 until 6. And when I tell you I interviewed and met everybody, oh my goodness. It was amazing. I got an opportunity to meet and talk to Governor Pritzker. I interviewed at length Tavis Smiley, Mark Morial from the Urban League, Roland Martin, the mayor of Baltimore, the mayor of Milwaukee. Just so many influential people that had so much to say. And that was a great experience. If we're talking strictly socially, my daughter teases me. I don't know if you guys ever watch Frasier.
Yes.
That's her nickname for me because he was a radio host. And if Frasier loved the arts and he loves the theater. That's pretty much me. I'm a radio host and I stay at some type of production or concert or play. And the most memorable of which to date, and I've seen many, but the most memorable of which had to be last November when I saw The Wiz.
Nice.
Yeah, that was absolutely amazing.
I love the theater too, so we have that in common, friend. And so, what's been one of your most favorite interviews?
One of my favorite interviews, I host a graduation twice a year. They have them 2 times a year for an organization called the Dovetail Project. It's ran by a gentleman named Sheldon Smith, and he's actually a former CNN hero. Back in 2016, he was a CNN hero. And what his organization does is it helps young Black men ages 18 to 24 who have been incarcerated become better fathers. And so it teaches them one about the law, and two, it helps them with job placement, resume building, so many other things. It's a great curriculum that these young men go through. And oftentimes, these are the very young people that we want to forget about, that we want to be invisible. I've heard many of them say that the graduation that they go through at the Dovetail Project is the first graduation they ever had in their life. And so when I see these young men who are all loving fathers, and many of them have very young children, 6 months, 3 years old, so forth. And many of the kids, their babies are at the graduation and their families are there to support them. There's really not a dry eye in the house because the 180 that the Dovetail Project helps these young men turn into their lives is absolutely amazing. So after every graduation, he'll take 3 graduates, bring them on to the station, and I'll just have them talk about their stories. And it's just amazing and inspiring to hear them talk about their low points and what made them want to change and be different and how they came across this wonderful program and who recommended it. That is one of my favorites because, again, I am of the mindset that no one is irredeemable, in particular, young people. And, I think we need to be reminded of what redemption looks like. It is not just to the benefit of them, it is to the benefit of us all.
That is great. I love the sound of that project, and I can see why that would be one of your favorites.
And let me add this too, because this is the delicious irony of it. When I started my podcast in 2015, Sheldon Smith was my very first guest. He was the first person I had ever interviewed as a radio host.
Wow. That's awesome. Awesome. So we talked about your great career that I enjoy watching, and you mentioned being on dialysis. Tell us, how'd your kidney journey begin?
Well, I'll try and keep this as succinct as possible as well. Long story short, I had undiagnosed high blood pressure. The symptoms were I was having headaches daily, and I'm 27 years old. Otherwise, like if you look at me visually, I am very fit. As a matter of fact, I would say I was probably somebody you did not want to mess with, right? But what's going on internally is I have this hypertension that I wasn't aware of. It's causing me to have headaches, and instead of going to the doctor, because this went on for months, instead of going to the doctor, I'm taking Advil or Aleve or something. I think Advil every day, which is actually exasperating it, right? And
Correct.
so it all came to a head one fateful night. I had eaten something really, really high in sodium that made me black out. And I was able to articulate to my then wife, to call 911 because I could feel it coming on. By the time I came to in the ambulance, I'm on the way to the hospital. I get to the hospital, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and my blood pressure, I don't remember what the bottom number was, but I do remember that the top number was 230. So here I am with this extreme, stroke level potential blood pressure that I didn't have a stroke. And the ER doctor comes to see me. And again, she's looking at me as this very physically fit and very young person, because again, I'm only 27 years old. And she says to me, "What kind of drugs are you on?" "Doc, I wish it was that simple. I'm not on any drugs." She's like, "Hey, we're going to find out, right?" I was like, "Oh, you're serious?" "Okay, no, I'm not on any drugs. I wish it were that, because no, I don't know what this is." I got admitted to the hospital the next day. My primary care physician came into the room after all the blood work and everything had been done, and he said, "Well, it looks like you've lost about 80% of your kidney function. You're going to have about a year and a half before you're going to need a transplant." And the funny thing was, minus the headaches, I felt fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I received my transplant about a year and a half later in May of 2003, and it was a living related donor.
Okay.
It took well initially. It lasted about 6 years. In all that time, when he gave me that diagnosis, I had never gone on dialysis. I didn't know what dialysis was.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I kid you not, 3 days before my actual kidney transplant, I was at the lakefront playing full court basketball. It never really registered to me at that time between my youth. I never realized and appreciated how sick I really was.
Mm-hmm.
My actual diagnosis is FSGS. That means focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, which is a very fancy word for we don't know. it, it really is. And so, again, the transplanted kidney lasted about 5 or 6 years, closer to 6. And then it began to reject. And that's when we began to have serious conversations about dialysis. And that's when I began to really feel, the reality of it. The anemia, when the kidney is not working, I didn't know this, that the kidney relates information to the bone marrow, which creates more red blood cells, because red blood cells die every day, but you make more. But when the kidneys don't work, there's no communication to the bone marrow to continue to produce it. So then you become anemic.
Yes.
And, when the kidney rejected, I'd gone to see my nephrologist. My hemoglobin was 8. And he said, I just don't understand how you're walking around the way you are, given where your hemoglobin was. And I was tired and I was cold all the time. So much so I remember for the Christmas party, I was at work and they have the Secret Santa. Well,
Mm-hmm.
my Secret Santa had brought me a personal space heater because they said I always complained about how cold I was. And so I remember going to dialysis initially because you have to you can't just, well, you can just start it in an emergency situation, but this wasn't emergency. We were able to plan it. With the planning, I was able to, have my operation to get my fistula in my left arm. I want it in my off arm because I'm right-handed. And the fistula takes, that's where they connect the vein and an artery because your normal vein is not large enough to accommodate the needle nor the blood flow that's necessary for an effective dialysis treatment. So they have to connect the vein to the artery, the larger artery, and then let it mature for a couple of months. So once that happened and I started my dialysis in April of 2009, one of the things that they do at dialysis, there's a shot that they can give you in the machine, so you don't have to actually endure the shot, that will help replicate that communication to your bone marrow to start making red blood cells. So after a couple of dialysis sessions, I remember, I'll never forget, I was in bed with my wife and I said to her, like very randomly, I said, I feel better. And what I was feeling was I had new energy because my blood level had gone up. I don't remember what it was, but it began to normalize. So now I was getting oxygen to my muscles. I wasn't short of breath anymore. I wasn't cold anymore. I had better energy levels. And that was the first time that I really began to just be appreciative of dialysis because I knew what it was like. I saw what it was like to be off it or not have it. And I saw what it meant for my life to be on it. And I felt like a new man literally within a week.
Well, that's great. And we always talk about dialysis as being a life-saving treatment. And sounds like you're experiencing that. And it sounds like you're certainly thriving on dialysis. And so that brings me to my next question, which is how do you balance dialysis treatments along with your very busy career?
I'm blessed. I'm blessed. So the first thing, the good thing is most dialysis centers have 3 shifts, at least 3. I'm first shift, which means I'm able to arrive at the center at 3:30 in the morning. I have a 4-hour session, so I'm pretty much done right around 8 o'clock. So by 8 a.m., I've already had my dialysis treatment. When I started dialysis in 2009, I was on first shift. So, and I picked a center that was near my job. So I would go to dialysis, get done with that about 8:30, and travel to work and be at work by 9 o'clock, and I would work my full shift straight. And so I think for me, in my experience, if you busy yourself. I didn't have time to think about how sick I was because I had a job to do. So I would go from dialysis straight to work, and I would be so consumed with my job that I never really had a chance to really think about what just happened. And so the busying of my life was really, really instrumental in me developing that habit, getting into that system, getting into that rhythm. And after a while, I never had to even think about it. It just becomes what you do.
So you said you started dialysis in 2009, and if my math is correct, does that mean you've been on dialysis for 15 years now?
Your math is correct, Miss Monica.
Are you trying to get a transplant?
Yes, I am. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, right now I'm making some insurance adjustments, which is the holdup, but it will be corrected in open enrollment in October of this year, which means come January, I'll have that issue straightened out. Once that issue straightened out, I'll then be able to register with whatever hospital. It'll likely be Loyola. And because of the length of time that I've been on dialysis, once I do all the requisite testing again, I'll be shot up to the top of the list.
Right.
And hopefully, shortly thereafter, we'll be able to have the surgery and receive the kit.
Okay, sounds great to me. I look forward to that.
Oh, as do I.
I know you do. I know you do. What's one thing on your bucket list that you're determined to cross off?
One thing on my bucket list that I'd like to cross off is to finish my book, How to Live Your Best Life on Dialysis.
That sounds like a great book.
Yes, I don't think anything is more paramount than that. After I do that, and I'm on the speaking circuit, then that'll allow me to do the other thing that I'd like to do, which is travel. But if I could circle back to the book for just one moment,
Uh-huh.
because in my experience on dialysis, I learned everything that I learned the hard way. There's not a lot of guidance to teach you how to have a good session or the most productive session you can have. And there are potential pitfalls in a dialysis session that no one warned me about. I had never heard of a such thing as low blood pressure,
Yes,
but
you're right.
but there absolutely is.
Yes.
They didn't tell me about the potential cramping. So there are things that you can actually do, steps. There are warning signs that you can observe and steps you can take to help mitigate those dynamics as much as possible. But I had to learn all of those things. There are things that you can do when you leave to recover. There are ways that you can advocate for yourself. I tell you this, I know that machine almost as well as a technician does. I know the different screens. I know what they mean. I know the information on them. There's something called a crit line screen that you can look at, and it gives you an idea. There's a graph that gives you an idea of how much fluid that you're pulling off. And you can say, oh, that looks aggressive. Let's back that up a little bit. I think that's a little too much. Oh, you know what? Or you could look at it and say, oh, we're not pulling enough. Go ahead and increase the goal. But those are things that, again, as you become an advocate for yourself, it helps you develop the best session possible. And that really is the goal, because the technician's job is to get you through the session. What many of them don't consider is what happens after you leave, because your life doesn't stop after you leave. You actually have to be able to function. You actually have to be able to get along after you leave the session, but you're not their problem after you leave. So you have to be able to anticipate your needs and then convey that to them, because their goal is to get you to this, I won't call it arbitrary, but their goal is to get you to what's known as a dry weight. That's what their goal is. That's what their job is. And sometimes you have to be able to say and be aware that that particular number at that particular time may not be where you really are, and it can be detrimental or harmful for you to be trying to achieve that particular number. And so you can go home and then you make it through the session, but now as you lay down, I'm cramping for the next 3 or 4 hours because they were too aggressive in trying to pull the requisite fluid off. So again, I want to write this book so they don't have the same experience as I had. Also, I want to be able to talk to family members about how to support someone that's on dialysis. I have two wonderful, wonderful children. They're grown now, but they've seen my entire journey. And the great thing about them is they can look at me and they're in tune with me enough to know, oh, dad might need a little more support. I can tell he's not his normal self. Today, he's a little bit slower. And so, you can, as a family member, There are things that you can do, conversations you can have, in ways you can support and encourage someone that's on dialysis, because it's not just a physical toll. It is definitely a mental toll and even sometimes a spiritual.
Wow. Well, I look forward to your book because self advocacy in dialysis is of the utmost importance. Everything that you just spelled out is so true and so clear. And I will be 100% the number one fan of that book because it is really necessary. People really have to understand that dialysis, they have to go to dialysis, but they don't have to allow dialysis to have them.
That's right.
And they can be their own advocate, just like you said. There's so much that you can do for yourself. And I learned it all the hard way, like you said, and I lived it, and it allowed me to thrive while I was on dialysis. So,
Honestly, that's the goal, because so many people are under the misconception that life stops because you're on dialysis. No, you can live a full and robust life, and every day that you have on dialysis is a blessing.
yes.
And I think that for me, that's where I start. One day I was at my session. I had a technician at the time that, to be honest with you, Miss Monica, I really wasn't particularly fond of.
Mm-hmm.
this is this was not this is not my favorite technician. But it was a very cold day in the wintertime, and I had a voice inside me. You can call it my spirit, call it whatever you like, that said to me, "You need to thank her today." And my mind said, "But I don't really like her." Right? So I'm having this internal conflict about this very clear message I got, because I heard it very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And I went ahead and obeyed and succumbed to the message. And I said, "Hey, I just want to tell you, I just want to thank you because," and this is true though, I wasn't just blowing smoke. I said, "No matter what the conditions are outside, you guys are here every time."
Yes.
Again, I'm first shift. So if I have to be there at 3:30, they're there at 2:30.
Right.
And no matter how cold it is, no matter how many cars aren't starting, no matter how much snow is outside, they are there.
Right.
And I said, "I just want to thank you for the consistency. I've never not been able to do my session because they didn't show up."
Mm-hmm.
And she was so utterly appreciative of that message. And ironically, it changed the entire dynamic of our relationship. Ever since then, she's been one of my favorite techs, and I'm one of her favorite patients.
Yeah, a little bit of kindness goes a long way.
Goes a long way.
So, what's something that you wish healthcare providers understood more about the patient experience?
I'll give you a very practical example. One of the medications that, you have to manage your phosphorus when you're on dialysis.
Yes.
And one of the medications, and it's a very effective medication, they prescribed this pill for me. It looks like a huge Tums. It's twice the size of a Tums. And they said the instruction was chew it after meals.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the most god awful tasting medication I had. I would eat 1,000 Tums before I ate this thing again. And so because of that, I kind of resisted eating it. My phosphorus was high. And she's like, "Why aren't you taking the pill?" And then I asked her one day, I said, "Let me ask you a question. Can I take the pill, cut it in half, and then swallow it?" She said, "Sure, you don't have to chew it." I said, "You should tell people that."
Right.
So I said, have you ever tasted that pill? And she said, "No." I said, "You should taste it, right? And you should tell people that they can cut it in half and swallow it, because you would get more patient participation, because you have no idea how nasty the pill is." Sometimes I think they forget, I think sometimes they get so caught up in numbers that they have to remember the human element to what we're in, the situation that we're in. And it very much requires that. Dialysis is so much bigger than dry weights and hemoglobin levels and PTH levels. All those things are very, very important. But there is a balance between all of it. And at the root of all that, at the base of all that, is a person. And I think sometimes that can be easily forgotten about.
Well, that's very well said. And we're going to leave it right there. I want to thank you. I am so grateful to you, my friend Atiba, for sharing your story with us today.
It is my pleasure. I thank you for being asked. Whatever I can do to help someone have a better experience, I promise you I am here for it. And I'm always here for you, Miss Monica.
All right. I'm so grateful to my friend Atiba for sharing his story with us. If you're struggling to balance life and kidney disease, surrounding yourself with a community can be helpful. At NKFI, we have patient programs and networking opportunities. To find out more, go to nkfi.org. I'm Monica Fox, and this is The Journey Continues. Prevention's a key part of our mission at the Kidney Foundation. That's why at the end of each episode, we share a health tip.
Here's today's health tip on managing diabetes. Diabetes is one of the leading causes of chronic kidney disease. It's a condition where your body cannot make enough insulin or is unable to use the insulin that's made. Insulin is a hormone that's produced by the islet cells in your pancreas to regulate your blood glucose. Long-term or not well-controlled diabetes can damage small blood vessels, which limits your kidney's ability to clean your blood well. Diabetes is monitored by the ABCs. A stands for checking your hemoglobin A1C and having it treated if it's high. B stands for blood pressure. It's important to monitor and treat high blood pressure. And C stands for cholesterol. Monitor and treat high cholesterol. If you are someone living with diabetes, a lot of the day-to-day management of it is in your control. Here are 10 important ways you can make a big impact on your diabetes health. Make healthy food choices. Create a healthy meal plan or get the help of a registered dietitian to create a plan that's right for you. Be physically active and get in exercise to help control your blood pressure, blood sugar, and lower your cholesterol. Take all of your medications as prescribed. Keep a logbook with your blood sugar numbers and take that book to your doctor appointments. Watch for symptoms or changes in your health and communicate that with your healthcare team. If you're feeling overwhelmed or need more support, talk with your healthcare team to discuss options. Ask questions so that you feel confident in your ability to care for yourself. Talk with others who are living with diabetes and find support to help you. Get tested for chronic kidney disease at least once a year. Stay informed and keep learning so that you can manage your chronic health condition. With today's health tip, I'm Melissa Prest, a registered dietitian nutritionist.